Uh, Good evening, everybody. My name is Jose Lee,
I'm Lisa.
I'm Will.
I'm Evan.
and today we will present you our game Shotoku's Defense. Okay, what you just saw was our game Shotoku's Defense. Our game is a physics-based combat virtual reality game in which, through the use of motion controllers, the player can throw rocks, raise spikes, and stop enemies with walls and quicksand. Our game was inspired by the Japanese temple Shitennoji, in which we abstracted it and we stylized it as you go and defeat enemies. So our main inspiration was the Soga Mononobe battle in Mount Shigi around the 600, where Prince Shotoku prayed to Bishamonten, a heavenly king, before defeating the Mononobe. After this, Prince Shotoku built Shitennoji. Our game takes place after these events, where the Mononobe plan their revenge and decide to invade Shitennoji again. So Prince Shotoku is then blessed by Bishamonten, and with his newly found earth powers, he will defend the temple.
The reason we went with virtual reality for our medium is because it's become a really popular medium the past few years, and none of us had actually worked with it before, so we wanted to get some experience. And we chose the Unity game engine because it's easy to pick up for beginners, and it's intuitive for programmers, and it has good VR support. For our map, as Jose said, it's based off of the Shitennoji temple in Osaka, and we stylized it to be a little more VR friendly and game friendly. Particularly, we offset the buildings a little bit so you get good viewing angles, so that you can see both buildings at all times. And we also have a multi-leveled ground so that it's not completely flat, because in VR everything looks a lot flatter than it does in real life. And as you saw in the video, there's a lot more foliage than in the real Shitennoji, and that's to make it feel like a lot more like you're in Japan.
So when designing the actual visuals of the environment of our game world, we tried to pull as much real elements from real life into our abstract style that we created. So you can see the two temples in Shitennoji on that first image there. In our game we still have that red and purple color scheme. We have the lightning rod on top of the taller temple and the golden horns atop the wider temple, just like the actual Shitennoji in Osaka that we visited. The lighting design in our game, we chose nighttime with the glow of the flickering stone torches or toros, because it's a lot more visually interesting than daylight. You can see our reference there for an actual stone toro in Japan. And then some of the darker areas of the map we made more visually interesting with some particle effects like these fireflies that you see here, again based on real life.
For the enemies, they are based off of the Mononobe warriors that are in our game invading the Shitennoji. And the heavy enemy is the one that most closely resembles the Mononobe warrior. He has the armor and the waist armor, and he also wears boots, which the Mononobe do wear. And he also wears a kabuto, which is a helmet that has an antler-like decorative piece at the front. And he's meant to be like a bold character that sort of gets in your face. And the light enemy is the exact opposite of the heavy enemy. He's very cunning, stays in the shadows, which is why he has dark clothes so that you can't really see him that well. And the medium is meant to be a versatile, sort of agile person, and that is able to adapt to the situation very easily.
So on the gameplay side of things, when designing the behavior of our enemies, we wanted each to be simple by themselves, but when combined with other types of enemies, create more complicated gameplay scenarios. So for example, the heavy enemy walks very slowly and can only attack at a melee range, but deals a lot of damage, while the light enemy always stays at a faraway range and deals a consistent low amount of damage with his ranged attacks. So each are very simple to understand in their own right and simple to counter, but when combined, the player has decisions they have to make about who to take out first, who's dealing more damage, and how they should address the situation. The medium enemy, with their high mobility, can attack from a close range or a far range, so it serves to further confuse this strategy making that the player has to do with all three enemies at the same time.
Now the strategy that the player comes up with is through their abilities that they have. So we have 4 abilities in our game, which the goal when creating these abilities was to get the player to move as much as we possibly could and to make it so that they felt as if the actions they were performing in real life were accurately depicted in the game. Additionally, we wanted to minimize the number of inputs through the controller so that we could really accentuate that feature of the motion control. So to do this, we ended up implementing a physics-based damage system where the larger the object you create and the faster that object is moving, the more damage you're going to deal to the enemies. Now, an example of this could be with the rocks. So you start with a small rock, but you can grow it up to be larger in size, and then the faster you throw it, the more damage it's going to deal, as you can see here.
So through our game, the player will go through 5 different locations. Each one either introduces a new type of enemy or a new gameplay mechanic. So our goal with our enemies was to encourage some fast-paced gameplay where the player has to be aware of their environments. We accomplish this through our enemy spawning system, in which we can decide at which location, how many enemies, and which types of enemies we decide to spawn. So this allows to create really creative design scenarios. For example, here we have the first location of our game, in which we decide to only spawn heavy enemies. Heavy enemies are slow, and they only approach from the front, so the player can get used to their combat abilities. But in the next location, this is a small corridor with two areas where the enemies can approach. So the player starts looking towards the green circle, and the first enemy spawns from the red circle. And this encourages the player to turn around and look at their environments. And this is one of the ways we teach the player how to be aware of their environment.
So throughout our development period, we had 3 different opportunities to play test our game. The first of which was with our PreAlpha testing that primarily focused on the abilities that the player was using and the motion controls they were using to do so, where we had 4 targets for the player to attack with their different abilities. Now, the findings that we had from this was that we could make our attacks even more threatening by making the spikes sharper and things of those sorts, and we could also further reduce the controls that we had at the time, where the wall at the time required 4 inputs, but then we reduced it to 2. Our second round of play testing was the alpha testing, where it was primarily focused on the combat system and making sure that it was enjoyable for the user. Now, what we mainly found with this was that in order to accentuate all of the things that we had implemented for our game, we needed a good tutorial and audio system so that the player knew what was going on at all times. Our final round of testing was beta testing, where it was the full game with the tutorial, audio, and they went through all 5 locations. And what we took away from our playtesters was they found it to be an extremely fun game, but we could have added even more audio and tutorial emphasis so that they could have gotten even more out of the game.
So just to wrap things up, some things that went wrong during our development process, prioritizing what needed to be done before each round of playtesting. As Evan just said, there was a lot of audio elements in the tutorial that did not make it in time for us to have them fully implemented for beta testing, which is when we really needed to see their functionality. And we also discovered that it's a lot harder to teach players how to move in VR because of that disconnect between what you're going to do in virtual reality and what you're going to do in real life. On the bright side of things, our players really found the game to be enjoyable. They found the world to be immersive and feel like Japan. And we were able to achieve all of the features that we set out to implement at the beginning of the project, thanks to some good communication among team members. And of course, we'd like to thank our professors at Ritsu University for providing us with the space and the materials that we needed to complete this project, and our professors at Li-Quiel for their support and advice throughout the development. Thank you very much.